Michael Chavis doesn't feel like he should matter. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, when you pick up these players from other teams at kind of their mid-20s, and even if they had top-level prospect status at some point, the way Chavis did, you still like, yeah, but it's somebody else's wastebasket that I'm picking through. Well, what if? Good morning to you. Good Monday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Pirates. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into football and or hockey, I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Penguins that I hope you'll check out. Pirates 9, Cardinals 4. That's how you get your first W of the season. This, of course, yesterday at Busch Stadium in St. Louis. Chavis went, deep breath here, 3 for 4 with a grand slam and a walk. That's a pretty significant output for a single day. And he was in the number 3 spot of the order, which is part of why he was able to get a grand slam, because Brian Hayes, Brian Reynolds, Ben Gamble got on before him. And he was right in the middle of what felt like, boy, am I going to hate myself for saying this out loud, but it felt like a pretty decent offensive output. And I say that in the context of the Pirates having 15 hits and Yoshi Tsutsugo, who'd been their only guy who'd been hitting before that in the first 2 games, going 0 for 5 with 4 Ks. Also productive, Hayes and Gamble each had 2 hits. Diego Castillo, spring hero, 3 for 5. This is, how do I put this in a way that doesn't come back to bite me in a day or two? Because that's how it works with the Pirates. You say something that's even remotely encouraging or positive or just anything other than killing them, and it ends up being something that gets sent to @freezingcoldtakes on Twitter. I feel as if the potential exists for the 2022 roster to be better offensively than what most people, myself included, think. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous for me to have both thoughts, but my default mode on this offense is that it would be okay if management, and Derek Shelton in particular, prioritized playing the bats. I am up to here with defensive versatility on this roster. I'm up to here with this being a priority, even in the minor leagues. If you have players who are mediocre, don't look like they'll ever be able to contribute to you on an everyday basis, no matter what you do with them, go nuts. Take them on a side field in Bradenton and teach them every position in the book. Otherwise, play the bats. I really, really don't think this should be all that complicated. This portion of Daily Shot of Pirates is brought to you by our friends at North Shore Tavern. That's directly across Federal Street from PNC Park. It's home of Steak on a Stone, an eating experience, underscoring the word experience. The steak is brought to you partially cooked on an 800-degree stone, and you do the rest. It's a ton of fun, it's a great meal, and it's a baseball atmosphere like no other in Pittsburgh. North Shore Tavern, right across Federal Street from PNC Park. Did you know that in 2021, the Pirates, despite having lost 101 games, had a winning record whenever they scored 4 or more runs? 4 or more runs? Just 4. That is not to suggest that they were some really good pitching team. Rather, they were a really, really good defensive team, but they were able to save runs either way. And they didn't need much by way of scoring in order to be competitive. Now, I will respect into infinity this manager's belief in fundamentals. I know that you can't have it both ways, meaning that we can't sit here and wag our fingers about this mistake or that mistake and say that the Pirates are sloppy and then rip them for having Yoshi in the lineup, even though he might be one of your top 2 or 3 bats, while he'll butcher something out there. I feel the same way about O'Neal Cruz. I'll take him at shortstop. Why? Because if you have a bat like that who can play shortstop at an even reasonable level, I will value that over whatever it is that he does or doesn't bring defensively. If he can stay there, if he can be a shortstop, just be a shortstop. Don't have to be a great one. Defense is nice, and the Pirates, by the way, yesterday were excellent defensively, as Shelton acknowledged to reporters in St. Louis. Good for them. I mean, that's all the better if you can find both worlds. But even if you can't, when you're looking at certain specific spots on this diamond for this team, and I'm singling out second base, really, because second base is the one that, as Shelton has admitted himself, is the one that looks like it's going to have the heaviest rotation of players between Chavis and Hoy Park, and maybe even Kevin Newman sliding over there, Cole Tucker, Diego Castillo. There's a lot of second basemen on the active roster right now. Play the bat in right field, where there's still really no clear-cut actual right fielder. Play the bat. I'm not telling you anything on this episode that the advanced analytics wouldn't powerfully support. There is greater value in scoring a run than in having people out in the field who might be able to prevent a run. If you do what Chavis did yesterday, meaning, 3 for 4 with a slam and a walk, Chavis would have to make, 11 billion Gold Glove level plays at second base to try to come up with the equivalent of that kind of production. I'm exaggerating, but you get the point. Preach the fundamentals. Teach the fundamentals. Make them better defensively, but only after they hit their way into your lineup. When we come back, just one question. Welcome back. Today's J1Q comes from Bob, who asks, do you see Brian Hayes emerging as this team's leader? Is he the new Kutch? Bob, I see those as being very different questions, and I'm going to start with some context here. Let's rewind to Kutch, who was not really ever the Pirates' leader. There's a difference between a team's best player, most popular player, or even the vague and somewhat newish designation face of the franchise. Kutch was all of those things, obviously, but Kutch was not going to be the guy who stood up in front of the clubhouse and reamed everybody out. It's just not his DNA. And you can force that sort of thing to an extent, but people who are around you every day for several hours a day are going to see through it. And that really wasn't him. On the Pirates' 3 playoff teams, of which Kutch was an enormous part, inside and outside the clubhouse, meaning our perception of him, the way he was the one who came up with the blackout designation for the playoff game and all that other stuff, Kutch wasn't the guy in those rooms. A.J. Burnett was. Russell Martin was. There's actually a long list of people who were ahead of him, depending on which of those 3 years you'd care to pick out. Now, that said, can Key become the next Kutch in terms of being an anchor, in terms of being a best player in terms of being a role model, being out there every day. Here comes that same discussion again with Key. And getting the job done and setting the tone for players in the minors to look up to and say, wow, someday I'm going to be playing in Pittsburgh alongside Brian Hayes. Yes, he can be all of those things. And I'll take it further. He wants to be all of those things. We had a really good talk with about a week to go in spring training, he and I. This was in Bradenton. And he spoke about a lot of the individual prospects, naming guys. To be honest with you, some of them were not prospects with whom I'm familiar. So he wasn't just rattling off, this is my point here, something off a Baseball America list. These are players and people that he'd gotten to know. He is a believer in this team's future. I understand anytime, again, somebody says something positive about the Pirates, even if it's one of the Pirates, it gets a certain reaction. He is a believer. He's seen it with his own eyes. He believes they're coming, and that when they do, it's going to be very, very good for him and everyone. That's his attitude. That's his approach. So how that translates into leadership or vocal leadership right now, and I'm not saying anything untoward here, the Pirates don't have that individual. I had a talk with one of the younger guys who's kind of on the border of this roster, so they weren't comfortable going on the record with it. But the way it was phrased is, look, the more of us that become more entrenched here, the more of us that become more a solid part of that foundation, the more of us are going to feel comfortable stepping up and being that guy, the way Joe Musgrove was. Joe Musgrove is actually a perfect example of the kind of player that I think you're projecting here, who's going to step up, who's going to be the one that says stuff whenever things get bad, who feels comfortable standing in a clubhouse of major league professionals and declaring himself a leader. That's something that Joe did pretty early in his time here. That's not Key. That's not Key 2 or 3 years from now either. It's not going to be. It's not Brian Reynolds either. Reynolds still probably has the most righteous claim to face of the franchise, for whatever that's worth at this still natal stage of all this. But the Mr. Cool, the Johnny Cash thing, that doesn't cut it in those settings either. You know, I don't believe this team has that player yet. If there's one who's probably going to be more likely than someone else to at least take charge of one component, it's going to be Roberto Perez with the pitchers, mostly because he has to, but also because of who he is and 2 Gold Gloves and all else that he's accomplished in the majors. But that other thing, the anointing, the leader, or who this is going to be built around, that doesn't exist yet. It just doesn't. I appreciate the question. It's a good one. I appreciate everyone listening to Daily Shot of Pirates. We'll do another one tomorrow. In advance, the franchise's 136th home opener.